The arrival of the inspector is entirely symbolic. Remember that the best thing about Inspector Calls is that every single character is symbolic and metaphorical and allegorical of an idea that Priestley wants to represent to his 1945 audience and beyond. So the inspector arrives in the middle of Mr. Burling's long, verbose speeches. Yeah, Mr. Burling has been monologuing about individualism and the benefits of patriarchy and capitalism. A man has to look after himself and his own, talked about business, etc. And Mr. Burling, this hard-headed, selfish man, has been boasting about kind of the power of capitalism, the power of business, the inevitability of like social progression and prosperity and money. And that's interrupted by the sharp ring of the doorbell, which signals the arrival of the inspector. So literally, the sharp doorbell interrupts the speech. Literally interrupts the speech. It stops him speaking. Metaphorically, because that speech was about individualism, this sharp ring of the doorbell, the inspector's arrival, it disrupts this dogmatic individualism. He's no longer able to speak individualism. No longer able to speak about individualism. It's been stopped. And that metaphorically represents how the inspector wants to stop, to disrupt this dogmatic individualism, to reject it and get rid of it. And because Mr. Burling has been speaking for so long, we could also say he's disrupting dogmatic individualism and ideas that have persisted for a long time throughout society, which tells us that the inspector is a potent and disruptive force. So when we talk about the inspector, we're going to talk about him being able to smash through, okay? Remember the wall that has been built up by this unjust social hierarchy. The unfair social hierarchy has built a wall between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. And it is built through selfishness, hubris, capitalism, patriarchy. They are the bricks that build this wall that stop social mobility and fairness. And the inspector, he has the power to sharply disrupt and dismantle that wall. Therefore, he can disrupt and dismantle individualism, selfishness, capitalism, pride, injustice, and more. So I want you to always imagine him like this. He has the power to disrupt and dismantle. And if something is sharp, it is aggressive. It is forceful. And that's the same as the phrase cutting in. That stage direction is also given for how the inspector breaks into conversation. He often cuts into the words of the Burlings and by proxy the bourgeoisie. And it's suggesting that we must disrupt and destabilise capitalism by cutting into it. And if we're cutting into it, what are we taking away? What are we cutting into? We're cutting into the callousness, the misanthropy. We can disrupt and destabilise and dismantle the wall of injustice by cutting into the callousness and the misanthropy of the Burlings and by proxy the bourgeoisie. And if we're thinking really clever about this disruption, we'll remember that Priestley is inspired by Karl Marx and the ideas of Marxism. And Marx believed there needed to be a forcible overthrow of the ruling class, a forcible overthrow of the structures that have built that wall, a forcible overthrow of the Edwardian social hierarchy. And so by using these stage directions of sharp, of cutting in, of an aggressive and forceful force that is able to disrupt, destabilise and dismantle the ideas of the bourgeoisie by cutting into the callous misanthropy of it. He is revealing the power to forcibly overthrow these sets of ideas. And by forcibly overthrowing these ideas that have seemed quite hard-headed and quite dogmatic, we can start to create change within the Berlin family in this play, but metaphorically in society, change in society.